June 18, 1966. Ken Miles is 50 feet from immortality. His Ford GT40 is screaming down the Mulsanne Straight at 200 miles per hour, about to win the most prestigious race in motorsport history. He's faster than everyone. He's driven longer than anyone. He's demolishing Ferrari on their home turf. And in about 3 hours, Ford Motor Company is going to rob him of everything he worked for. Not because he wasn't good enough, because he was too good, and that terrified them. This is the story of how corporate ego, a photo finish and a rulebook nobody bothered to read, turned the greatest performance in endurance racing into the most controversial betrayal in sports history. Buckle up. Let's rewind to understand why any of this matters. In 1963, Henry Ford II had a problem. Actually, he had an Italian problem. Enzo Ferrari was making Ford look like they built tractors. Ferrari's cars were fast, sexy, and winning everything that mattered. Ford's cars? Well, they were dependable. About as exciting as beige wallpaper, but dependable. So Ford did what any massive American corporation does when their ego gets bruised. They tried to buy Ferrari. Wrote a check, rolled up to Maranello, and figured money talks. And it almost worked. Until Enzo read the fine print and realized Ford wanted control of his racing program. The same racing program that was basically his reason for existing. The deal died faster than a Pinto in a rear-end collision. Enzo Ferrari then did something that would haunt Ford for years. He told them, and I'm paraphrasing here because Enzo had a way with insults, that Ford couldn't build a race car if their assembly line depended on it. He called their cars ugly, called Ford executive suits who knew nothing about racing. Then he sold his company to Fiat instead, just to twist the knife. Henry Ford II reportedly turned to his executives and said 6 words that would change motorsport history. Go to Le Mans and win it. Not compete. Not participate. Win.
Machine with unlimited budget.
Whatever it takes. Beat Ferrari so badly they'd never recover. This wasn't about racing anymore. This was personal. Enter Carroll Shelby. Texas chicken farmer turned race car driver turned the only American to win Le Mans. Ford handed him a blank check and a simple mission. Build a car that can beat Ferrari. Shelby, being Shelby, didn't waste time. He assembled a team of the best engineers, designers and drivers money could buy. And then he hired Ken Miles. Now Ken Miles wasn't your typical 1960s race car driver. Most drivers back then were aristocrats, playboys, guys with family money who raced for fun. Miles, he was a working-class British engineer who'd fled to California after World War II. He'd been a tank instructor during the war, survived D-Day, and knew machines better than most engineers with fancy degrees. He wasn't charming. He wasn't diplomatic. He was brutally honest, had zero patience for corporate nonsense, and drove like physics was just a suggestion. The Ford executives hated him immediately. Miles would tell them their car was junk to their faces. He'd explain in painful technical detail exactly why their design choices were idiotic. He didn't play politics, didn't schmooze, just wanted to make the car faster. Shelby loved him for it. Ford Motor Company? They tolerated him because he was the fastest driver they had. The GT40 program started as an absolute disaster. They showed up to Le Mans with cars that barely made it past the warm-up lap. Transmissions exploded. Engines caught fire. It was embarrassing. Ferrari didn't even have to try. They just watched Ford's cars disintegrate and cruised to another victory. The Italian press had a field day, called the GT40 the GT no-go. Enzo Ferrari probably laughed so hard he cried. But Miles and Shelby went back to California and tore everything apart. They rebuilt the suspension, redesigned the aerodynamics, fixed the transmission. Miles tested every single change, pushing the car until something broke. Then they'd fix it and push harder. By 1965, they had something, not perfect, but something that could actually compete. 1965 Le Mans was better. Not good, but better. Miles and his co-driver were running strong, actually leading at one point, before the gearbox gave up with just hours to go. Ferrari won again. But Ford was getting closer. By 1966, the GT40 was a weapon. Miles had transformed it from a temperamental prototype into a legitimate race car. And Ford showed up to Le Mans that year with an army. 8 GT40s, the best drivers, unlimited resources. This wasn't racing anymore. This was an invasion. The race started at 4 p.m. on Saturday, June 18th. Typical Le Mans chaos. The famous Le Mans start, where drivers sprint to their cars, fire them up, and floor it. Miles hated this tradition, thought it was dangerous and stupid. So while everyone else sprinted, Miles calmly walked to his car, properly buckled his safety belts, checked his instruments, and then drove away. He was in last place after the first lap. He'd be in first place by midnight. Here's what you need to understand about Le Mans. It's not a race. It's a 24-hour mechanical torture test disguised as a race. The Circuit de la Sarthe is 8.5 miles of public roads temporarily closed for racing. There's the Mulsanne Straight, where cars hit over 200 miles per hour. There's the S's, a technical section that eats brake pads for breakfast. And then there are 24 hours of night driving, rain, fatigue, and mechanical failures. Most teams just hope their car finishes. Miles, he wanted to win. By Sunday morning, Miles was untouchable. The Ferraris, gone. Retired, broken, destroyed. The other Ford teams, struggling. But Miles's black GT40, #1, was running like a Swiss watch. Lap after lap after lap, perfect pace, perfect execution. He was hours ahead of the next Ford. He wasn't just going to win, he was going to dominate. And that's when Leo Beebe entered the story. Beebe was a Ford executive. One of those corporate guys who wore expensive suits, had never turned a wrench in his life, and thought racing was just marketing. He wasn't interested in who was fastest. He cared about photos, about optics, about making Ford look good in the newspapers. Beebe looked at the timing screens and saw a problem. Miles was so far ahead that if he won, it would just be one Ford car crossing the finish line. Boring photo. But if 3 Ford cars could cross the line together, side by side, that's a photo that would run on every front page in the world. That's marketing gold. So Beebe made a decision. He ordered Miles to slow down. Carroll Shelby tried to talk him out of it, told Beebe that Miles deserved to win, that he'd driven brilliantly, that you don't ask a race car driver to slow down when they're dominating. But Beebe pulled rank. Ford Motor Company was paying the bills. Beebe was the boss. Miles would slow down, and that was final. When Shelby radioed Miles and told him to back off, to let the other Fords catch up, Miles probably said some words that can't be repeated on YouTube. But he did it. He slowed down, watched his gap disappear. Let Bruce McLaren and Chris Amon in the #2 car close in. Let Ronnie Bucknam and Dick Hutcherson in the #5 car catch up. With 1 hour to go, 3 Ford GT40 Seds were running nose to tail. Exactly what Beebe wanted. The perfect photo finish. Ford beating Ferrari with a 1-2-3 finish. Historic. Unprecedented. Beautiful. Except for one tiny problem nobody had thought about. As the final hour ticked down, someone in Ford's timing and scoring crews started actually reading the Le Mans rulebook, and they discovered something interesting. In the event of a photo finish, the winner wouldn't be determined by who crossed the line first. It would be determined by who had traveled the furthest distance. Remember how Miles had started the race from a different position on the grid than McLaren? That meant even though they'd be crossing the line at the same time, McLaren's car had actually started further back on the track, which meant McLaren's car would have technically traveled a few extra meters over 24 hours. Someone realized this and rushed to tell Beebe, genius that he was. Decided not to tell anyone else. Not Shelby. Not Miles. Nobody. Because at this point, what difference did it make? The photo would still look amazing. Ford would still get their 1-2-3 finish. And honestly, Beebe probably thought this worked out better anyway. Bruce McLaren was a gentleman racer, polite, corporate-friendly, much easier to parade around than the abrasive Ken Miles. So Miles drove to the finish line thinking he was about to win Le Mans, thinking that after 24 hours of perfect driving, after years of development work, after all the testing and crashes and rebuilding, he was finally getting his moment. The 3 Ford GT40 Sistery crossed the line in formation, side by side, exactly as planned. The crowd went insane. Cameras flashed. It looked perfect. Ford executives were celebrating. They'd done it. Beaten Ferrari. Crushed them. This was the greatest moment in Ford racing history. And then the officials started measuring. Pulling out the rulebook, checking distances, calculating positions at the start versus positions at the finish. Bruce McLaren was declared the winner. Miles, second place. Miles stood on that podium, champagne being sprayed everywhere, cameras flashing, Ford executives celebrating, and you can see it in the photos. He's not celebrating. He's not smiling. He's just standing there, holding a trophy for second place, knowing he'd been robbed. Carroll Shelby was furious. He confronted BB right there at the track, told him exactly what he thought of his little photo finish stunt. Shelby knew what Miles had done. Miles had driven 2 stints longer than anyone else, had pushed harder, managed the car better, executed perfectly. He'd won that race by every measure that mattered, except the only one that Ford cared about. The photo. The motorsport press knew something was off immediately. Everyone had watched Miles dominate for 24 hours. Everyone saw him slow down in that final hour. The questions started flying. Why did Miles slow down? Who made that call? Did Ford deliberately manipulate the finish? Ford's official position? Miles had worn his car out, pushing too hard early in the race. He couldn't maintain pace. The other Ford drivers had been more conservative and had stronger cars at the end. It was just racing luck that all 3 cars finished together. Nobody believed that for a second. But what could Miles do? Sue Ford, the company that employed him, the only company building race cars fast enough to win? He had zero leverage. So he did interviews, smiled when he was supposed to smile, and told reporters he was thrilled with Ford's incredible 1-2-3 finish. But people who knew Miles could see the truth. Peter Miles, Ken's son, said years later that his father came home from Le Mans a changed person, quieter, more cynical. He'd believed in merit, believed that if you were fastest, you won. Le Mans taught him that wasn't how the world worked, not when corporations were involved. Here's what makes this even more tragic. 3 months later, Ken Miles was testing a new Ford race car, the J car, at Riverside International Raceway in California. The car suffered a catastrophic failure at high speed. The rear end lifted off the ground, the car flipped, and Miles was killed instantly. He was 47 years old. Ford Motor Company released a brief statement expressing their condolences. Leo BB didn't attend the funeral. Miles never got another chance at Le Mans. Never got another shot at the win that should have been his. That 1966 race was it. His one moment. And Ford took it from him for a photograph. Now here's the really infuriating part. That photo finish, the one that was supposed to be marketing gold, it barely made a dent. Sure, it ran in some papers. Sure, Ford got their headlines. But it wasn't the cultural moment BB thought it would be. Most people who weren't hardcore racing fans didn't even notice. And the people who did notice remembered it as controversial, not triumphant. Meanwhile, Miles' story became legend. The brilliant engineer and driver who got screwed by corporate politics. The working-class hero who beat the establishment only to have the establishment steal his victory. That's the story people remember. Not Ford's 1-2-3 finish. Not Bruce McLaren's technical victory. Ken Miles' betrayal. Christian Bale played Miles in the 2019 movie Ford v Ferrari, and it introduced a whole new generation to this story. The film took some liberties, sure, but it captured the essential truth. Miles was the best driver on the track that day. He deserved to win. And Ford chose a photo op over integrity. Bruce McLaren, for what it's worth, never celebrated that Le Mans victory the way winners usually do. He knew how it went down. Years later in interviews, he'd talk about 1966, and you could hear the discomfort in his voice. He was a gracious guy, a talented driver, but even he knew that win had an asterisk next to it. The motorsport community never forgot either. Le Mans 1966 became the textbook example of what happens when corporate interests override sporting merit. When marketing departments make racing decisions. When the photo matters more than the performance. And here's the thing that probably ate at Miles the most. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He wasn't trying to make a statement. He just wanted to drive fast and win races. That's it. That's all he ever wanted. The fame, the politics, the corporate nonsense. He hated all of it. He just wanted to be left alone with a fast car and a racetrack. Instead, he became the symbol for every athlete who's ever been screwed by forces outside their control. Every performer who did everything right and still lost because of politics. Every artist whose best work got buried because it wasn't commercially convenient. Ken Miles drove a perfect race. 24 hours. Faster than everyone. More consistent than everyone. Better than everyone. And he lost because his employer decided a marketing photo was more important than integrity. That's the explosive truth behind Le Mans 1966. Not a racing controversy. A betrayal. Simple as that. And somewhere, in some parallel universe where corporate executives don't make racing decisions, Ken Miles crossed that finish line first. Alone. Arms raised. Finally getting the victory he earned. In that universe, he's remembered as the Le Mans champion he should have been. Not the cautionary tale he became. But we don't live in that universe. We live in this one, where the photo mattered more than the performance. Where second place was the reward for perfection. Where Ken Miles learned the hardest lesson in sports. Being the best isn't enough when someone else controls the rulebook.